Good afternoon on a beautiful Oklahoma City Chamber kind of day. I'd like to welcome you to the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust February 22nd meeting. Please pardon the second string. I'm a second stringer, and I won't say your second string. Okay. Like to have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 24th trust meeting.
So move it.
All in favor, please say, cast your votes. Cast your votes. Can I hit the thingy bopper?
I'm not sure who's lit up. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about
Which way is it? Are we all
Like
lit
I
up?
said, we're all second string here. There we go. Except Roth is not here. Roth and Ryan. Roth and Ryan. Ryan's not here.
But you're the chair, so
Take me
where in the
off.
world are you? I'm so sorry. I
That's
should
all
have
right.
done this beforehand. Pardon me.
Like I said, we're the third string.
There we go.
Now Ross here.
Now Ross here. Push him back.
Let the record show that the side of the horseshoe that was doing that is the OSU side by addition.
For all the viewing public, the OSU side is not the laggers. Okay, we are just as good, if not better. Okay, all right, so we have a motion was approved for the minutes. All right, next on the topic of agenda is to ratify the OSET claims. It's in your packet. The docket summary listing of February 22nd. Are there any questions or comments relative to those? Entertain a motion.
So move.
All in favor, please cast your votes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda, specific items for individual consideration. A is the amendment number 1 to contract for landscape architectural services, project MP 0419, project 180 Bicentennial Park, City Hall lawn, landscape renovation, and civic park design with a sculpture garden. Be it Couch Drive and Walker Avenue, fee increase of $162,000 through TIF and GO bonds.
Madam Chairman, Eric Winger, our Public Works Director, is here this morning to talk to you about items A and B. They're related items, and he has a presentation regarding to those items.
Thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity. And I think to lead off, we have a presentation we'd like to show that addresses both. This is a presentation that has recently been shown to the City Council yesterday. We also took this to the DDRC meeting, a part of the design review meeting for the final plans just about 2 weeks ago. Thought it prudent to also bring you up to speed on some of the conversations that have been held over the past few weeks regarding the project. So if I might, I'd like to give the presentation and we could address items A and B. As most of you know, the Bicentennial Park project has been in the works for quite some time. There's been a lot of questions over the past several weeks about the public process. There's been some questions about attention to detail on the design, whether it was preserving portions of history, and then just some other questions in general that I think that this presentation will address. And so as we look at the background for the Bicentennial Park, as most of you know, it was included as a priority project in the implementation and coordination agreement between the City of Oklahoma City and Devon. The design actually began back in August of 2010, and so this has been something that's been long-term. Preliminary plan was presented and recommended by the Implementation Committee and also the Economic Development Trust. And so this includes some renderings that actually you have seen before about March of last year, and you'll find that a lot of those have not changed. There were some preliminary plans that were approved by Council in May of last year. There was actually also a relocation agreement. There's a lot of art pieces. There are statues, there are monuments, there are 2 time capsules. There's a series of things that are there that have been cataloged in detail. And the Arts Commission has agreed to receive those, store them safely, and make sure that they get relocated properly. Some of those, like the Maestro, you'll see in some of the drawings, are being relocated back to Bicentennial Park. Other pieces have other possible locations, but decisions haven't actually been made. So I mention this today as that is an ongoing discussion, but the Parks Department and the Arts Commission, along with the support of the City Council, the City Manager, have all agreed to make sure that those are relocated properly, some which actually may come back to Bicentennial Park. Final plans were actually completed in December of this past year, One of the reasons that we accelerated somewhat the final plans process, again, as you may know, is this year is the 75th anniversary of the Civic Center Music Hall. Had we not completed those plans and given the contractor an opportunity, we would have not been able to complete the project before September, which is when that grand celebration is planned. So there are some items that have gone to DDRC after the fact, and so again, as we go through the rest of the background, the purpose was to get those plans done early to make the best of the events at the end of the year. We did advertise, bids have been received. That is going to be item B in your packet today. But we have spent the past couple of weeks going back through the process, making sure that everyone has had their questions answered, and to ensure that we're all on the same page. So what you find on this slide is the rest of what has happened over the past couple of weeks, including the presentation that we're making today. What you're actually considering on your agenda today is the award of the construction contract. The plans have already been approved. Following your recommendation today and moving forward, City Council would consider this next Tuesday, at which time we would actually proceed with construction. So there is still one more approval required next week by the City Council. And again, if all the approvals are received, the work would be completed by September of this year. There was a lot of questions about the steering committee, the public process, and there was a steering committee identified. They actually held 9 meetings, and on this slide you'll find that this is a number of the individuals that were included. You'll find a list of city staff, but you'll also find OK Museum of Art, downtown Oklahoma City, the Chamber, Civic Center Music Hall Leadership OKC, the Arts Commission, and others. I think one of the questions that came up was there were others on the list that could have been included, and I think hindsight, whether we would have included some other historical preservation individuals, whether we maybe should have included OKC Beautiful and others, I think that we did receive those suggestions, and I think hindsight, it would have been nice for us to have probably expanded the list, but it was quite comprehensive, and so we show this to show that there was a group that met over 9 times that helped facilitate the design. The architect that presented PDG at City Council yesterday really went through an extensive background on the concept of the design, and I think that that was a lot what was presented to you not quite a year ago, but last March, and I'm going to run through these slides to just kind of refresh your memory. This is actually the original master plan of the Civic Center. And as you'll notice in the center of the drawing, you'll see City Hall. At the lower right, you'll see the County Courthouse, and in the upper left, you'll see the Civic Center Music Hall. You'll see the Bicentennial Park with a grand lawn in between those two facilities, City Hall and Civic Center. And that was really one of the major bases of the new Bicentennial Park design. You'll see that the grand lawn has been preserved. There's also some other architectural elements, and you'll find this in a lot of the aluminum millwork that's included also on this building and some of the others. You'll see some of the sweeping shapes, and these were integrated into the site plan. And this is what that result was. And so you'll find on the right-hand side of the drawing, this is City Hall. On the left-hand side of the drawing, you'll find Civic Center Music Hall. You'll find those sweeping elements in the rows of trees that you'll find on the north, on the top, and on the south, the bottom sides of that grand lawn. You'll also see that there's been the addition of a fountain stage with several other elements. There's 2 items on the left. You'll see 2 triangular shapes. Those are the new pavilions, and then there's also some signage that we're going to discuss. One of the biggest questions that came up over the past few weeks actually had to do with some criticism about the design of the City Hall portion of the project. There were some elements in the City Hall portion, including some modifications to the City Hall fountain, some additions like a new arch that just weren't as well received. Now, the approval that has been recommended does not include any improvements to City Hall project at this time. There is not the budget to proceed with those improvements, and so there's a lot of discussion that's going to be part of a future project. So we are looking just at Bicentennial Park. This is an existing aerial of the park as it stands today, and I think you'll see very clearly the grand lawn in the center. You'll see some of the other improvements. One of the other questions that has come up is preserving the history of the park, and what was noted was that there's actually been several renovations to Bicentennial Park since it was first opened. Some of those that are going to be the most notable on the left-hand side of this picture is a lot what was provided with the original Maps 1 improvements. This is a lot of the paving and some of the markings that you see there. There's also some new signage, the blue, black, and white art signage elements that were constructed. You also have the Maestro statue that was included in that. But there's been several renovations along the way. This is the rendering of what that park could look like with the Bicentennial Plan. And you'll again see that it's very open, The grand lawn is obviously very evident. You'll see the fountain in the background. You'll also still see the maintaining of the trees on both the north and the south sides of that park. Now, one of the items that I'll mention, and this was also quite concerning to many, was the removal of the trees. There are lots of trees that are there today, and they're in groups. And there was an arborist that was hired by the architect to review those and see if any could be salvaged. The size of a salvageable tree is actually smaller than some of the largest trees that are in the park. A good salvage size is somewhere between 8 and 10 inches, and some of those trees out there are much larger than that. When we looked at those surveys and when the architect prepared those recommendations, those trees are in small groups, and what happens is, even if they were salvaged, because they're so tightly placed, they're going to be lopsided. Only about half the tree would be able to actually have a canopy because of it being so close to the tree next to it. So once it was pulled out of that grouping, it actually would not be a very pretty tree at that point. And so that was part of the decision-making process. The other portion was there is a complete renovation of Bicentennial Park, all new utilities, new electrical, new water, new sewer, new irrigation, all as a part of this site. A lot of those systems are damaged and need to be replaced. With the amount of trenching and the amount of demolition, the fact is that a lot of the existing trees probably just would not survive. And so with those two items, the decision was made to proceed forward. Now, the replacement trees, not like what we see on the streetscapes for Project 180. We're talking very large trees that are 22 to 24 feet high, 6-inch caliper. So some of the largest trees that can be provided, the architect has also agreed to hand-pick those out of Atlanta, Georgia. And so that was also presented to the City Council yesterday. This is an existing view from the southeast corner of the park. Again, these are just to give you some reference to what exists today and what can possibly be for tomorrow. This is an overall overview if you were standing, say, on the roof of Civic Center Music Hall. You'll see at the bottom center, this is one of the pavilions that's being recommended as one of the alternates in item B on your agenda today. Again, we're looking at very much open spaces. You'll find these new sweeping sidewalks. Currently, the park is not very accessible from its perimeters. It has east-west sidewalks that don't pull pedestrians into the center of that park, and a lot of these sweeping sidewalks are going to provide a lot better access than what's there today. This is, again, another one of those views of the existing. As I wrap up this presentation, a couple of the other items that came into question. This is the Bicentennial Park water stage, and there was some questions about it being 12 inches high. It is made out of granite. There's 2 steps, and the water feature was actually located on the top of that granite elevated stage. The DDRC had some concerns about safety, and obviously this isn't a children's park, but there will most likely be children that access this and will want to play in that water. And so a design compromise was reached, and the water area of the stage is actually being lowered to grade, but the stage itself will actually be maintained on the left side in this drawing to ensure that we have an opportunity for events in Bicentennial Park. There's been a lot of coordination with the Civic Center Music Hall, opportunities that they might have to have outdoor events. As you might remember, Shakespeare in the Park was once here in Bicentennial Park, although it was relocated. There's opportunities to maybe be bringing back some of those outdoor arts type events. There's also further opportunities for outdoor concerts, and so with that format, the stage and the water feature are going to be maintained, and the safety concerns with the water, now with a lowered stage, as you can see in this picture, address that concern. DDRC had a unanimous recommendation to move the project forward after receiving the revised drawings. This is another of the existing photos, and this would be the Bicentennial Monument. This is one of the other major monuments that are located in that park. There's been a lot of discussion about whether this can be relocated to the park, and the answer is it can, along with several of the other art elements. And so that is a process that we'll be going through with, again, the Parks Department and the Arts Commission to make sure that those pieces are properly located. There's also going to be 2 signs located on Bicentennial Park in the current design. There has been discussion about converting these possibly to 1 sign. The reason for 2 signs, at least as a part of the design process, Walker Avenue is currently one way, and it was thought that 2 signs in the new 2-way travel would be more visible. They also wanted to preserve that central core of the park, leaving a single sign out of the center, trying to provide balance and uniformity to the design. There was a application that was originally going to be necessary to the Board of Adjustment. What we found was the signs were located too close to Walker Avenue. The architect did make a second revision to the drawings where those signs were moved back, and a Board of Adjustment was not required. And so the drawings, as revised, do not require any special exceptions. This is the sign that's currently at Bicentennial Park. And again, as one of the alternates, it's on item B in your agenda today. The actual digital display of this sign will be salvaged. It's the concrete elements that will be removed, and then it'll be reframed. And then this is just the west view perspective of the park to kind of give you just that grand idea. You can see the signs in the lower left and the lower right. It's a little hard to see the pavilions, but they're at the upper right and the upper left. Those will comprise the two alternate bids that we'll discuss in just a moment. And again, we're looking to seek council's consideration of this item on Tuesday. So the current site. And so that's what you'll find here on these next steps. And so working very much in a forward manner, we're looking for your consideration today. You've already approved the design. If we look at item A on your agenda today, what I will address with item A, this is an architectural amendment to PDG. They are the architect of the Bicentennial Park for $162,000. I mentioned the stakeholder process, and during that design process, there was some interest for some private donations to provide extra elements to the park that weren't in the base design. The signs that I showed, the pavilions that I showed, along with a few other elements that I'll mention. There were some spinning towers. There was a decorative arch on the City Hall lawn, and also some additional linear lighting that were included in that design. However, the architect was not paid for that work. We traditionally do look at architects providing alternate bids from time to time for projects when we have enhancements that might be considered by the city. In this case, these came through stakeholder requests to have these designed. There's an item that's not on your agenda today, but we're looking to put it on your March agenda. It's on for the City Council meeting next Tuesday along with this amendment, but the Devon companies have agreed to donate about $585,000 to fund those two amendments, or those two alternates, excuse me. That would be for the canopies, that would be for the footings for the canopies, the signs and the footing for the signs. And so the agreement that we've reached with them is if we will proceed with the amendment in the amount of $162,000, they have already donated, but that makes $585,000 available to actually construct those, not using city funds. Those would be privately donated funds. So today on item A, we're asking for your consideration and approval of the amendment to the architectural agreement with PDG for $162,000 so that we can take full advantage of those donated monies.
Are there any questions of Eric? Yes.
The documentation, Eric, on the, which was submitted, is there any editing that needs to be done on this to reflect exactly what took place?
My review shows that there's two items. There's one in the last sentence of the first paragraph. I think as it reads, design concepts were presented to the city and the steering committee. The presentation I showed today, the design was not presented to the city council until just this prior Tuesday, but there was steering committee presentations that were made. In the second paragraph, first sentence, the trust obviously did not make the direction to the architect. That was done through stakeholders that actually directed the work be performed. Those are the two items that I see that are different from what's included in your memo and as a part of our presentation today.
Will those be corrected by next Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, then going over to the next page, the wording on the, some of you might not wonder why, but I think this is important, so just bear with me if you would, trust members. Where the second whereas, the third whereas,
The answer is yes.
it will be
That
changed.
also reflects the language that's included in the memo that requires correction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Eric, just a couple questions, and I apologize if it bleeds into A and B. Help me understand both. Page 12 of the PowerPoint that you referenced, wanted to clarify, I thought I heard you refer to pavilion and canopy. I want to make sure you're not using those terms interchangeably. In the southeast corner, I see what appears to be a pavilion or some kind of canopy structure. Is that the item you referred to as a recent
So if you look
idea?
if you look at the drawing that's here on your screens now, this is actually looking from northwest to southeast. So the canopies are on the northwest and the southwest corners of the site. So these would be right next to the Civic Center Music Hall.
Okay. So then this one that is closer to City Hall, oh, I'm sorry, that is City Hall. Great, thank you. Okay. And these are concepts that were recent revelations or recent thoughts, not in the original design?
They weren't in the original design, but they were designed and bid with the project, and so detailed drawings were included. The contractors provided pricing, and on item B today, the prices that you see for that alternate bid are reflective of these items.
Okay.
So they're included.
Thank you. And did I hear you reference that some design work was done attributed to issues in and around City Hall, but yet the budget, or the capital budget, is not available for those aspects?
That's
going
correct.
forward?
That's correct.
So the idea is to capture the work that was done, even though the work we can't afford it.
So we sometimes do find that, in this case, for Bicentennial Park, we took two base bids. We took a base bid for the park, and then we took a second base bid for City Hall. We understood that there might be some budgetary constraints. The focus was on Bicentennial Park. The decision was made not to recommend City Hall at this time, but there's the opportunity to do it in the future.
Okay.
And as we get through it, the budget may allow for that. We just don't know that at this point in time. We do want to point out that City Hall landscaping was freshened up, I don't know how, fairly recently, where the Civic Center Park or Bicentennial Park had really not been touched since about '76,
Right.
with the exception of the entrance into the
Sure.
Civic Center back when the Civic Center was reopened.
Okay. And then a couple other questions. On the backup information for item A, it references an original estimated construction cost of 4.5. But do I read then from item B that we actually have a bid to be awarded in the amount of 3.6?
That is correct. So that would be the base bid just for the Bicentennial Park alone. I believe the 4.5 actually included part of City Hall, but it's not being recommended, so that might reflect some of the difference in price.
Okay.
But as a second note,
That was an original number, and we pared back the budgets on a number of places when we did the budget a number of months ago.
That's the good news, is that the bids came in more attractive, I guess.
but the 3.6 number also includes the $585,000 of donated proceeds, so the actual amount from the TIF would be $3,052,000.
Okay. And I guess what strikes me perhaps as high is the architectural fee based off the original estimate is still at about 9%, and now based off of the contract amount on item B with the amendment, it's what percent of the actual contract?
Well, we can calculate that, but the fact of the matter, they designed a lot of work, millions of dollars of work beyond what's awarded.
Okay.
So they did additional design beyond what the amount is that we're awarding today. They did a number of additional architectural features as well as the City Hall Park also.
Okay, so the 3.6 isn't a fair basis, but the 4.5 should be, right? If the original architectural contract is let based off of a construction estimate, there's a percentage that needs to correlate to the original.
So the original fee was based on the original scope of work, yes.
Okay, so the original scope of work, although it may be changed throughout the design period, 587 still seems a bit high to me based off of what the ultimate capital contract is going to be.
You know, I think, not having been involved since the original design, if I were to look at this project, I mean, it's unique. It also had a steering committee process that we don't normally engage. I think it had several elements that would be considered non-standard. But again, I think it was negotiated based on its original scope. The 5 alternates that were designed added to that scope, and the negotiated value for those is 162. So as we look at the alternates, that 162,000 applies to those. The original fee of 425 is towards the original design.
Okay. I certainly, excuse me, go ahead.
The base bid plus the alternates came in almost $5 million.
Hang on, I've
It was
got
in
the
that
notes here.
range.
The range on those was 3.6 to 4.5.
With the alternates? One alternate was
Without the
1.9.
alternate. Without the alternate.
So that's correct. That's just for those two alternates included in that range. So it was much higher than that if you include all the alternates and you also include City Hall, which was a part.
Low bid with all those alternates was Mike closer to 6?
Okay. That's good to hear. I think that seems more appropriate proportionally. And to City Manager Couch's comments, I certainly see the value in having design plans that are consistent with the original bicentennial, that if and when we can afford to do it elsewhere within City Hall or in and around the proximity, it makes sense to have them. I'm just trying to understand how we got to the amendment. You alluded in the beginning of your comments that there seemed to be a little bit of angst associated with where we're at today, and I don't know the history of that, but would you summarize that just people didn't feel to be a part of the process?
I don't think it was as much as not a part of the process as just not being informed. And I think one of the lessons learned as we look at staff and look back on this, the same stakeholder process was used on Mary Botanical Gardens. And it went very well. And we didn't receive a lot of negativity towards that, and it was replicated on Bicentennial Park. But I think for those that are involved in the park and just, again, a lack of information, we would have liked to have changed a few things in the last year. Opposed to having presented to the City Council the drawings that you see today for the first time just this past Tuesday, we probably would like to have done that at the preliminary report stage. So when we presented to the Development Trust in March of last year, we probably would have liked to have presented to the City Council. I think there are some things that we'll do different in the future, reconsider some of our higher priority projects within the city and making sure that this more information gets out earlier in the process instead of later. But actually, as we've gone through the DDRC twice, we've made 2 presentations. We've made a presentation to the City Council. I think what we're finding, generally speaking, I'm not going to say everybody's in agreement, but generally speaking, there has been a process that's been followed. It's been very detailed. I think there's been a sense of preservation of the park when we talk about the Grand Lawn, making sure that we replace those with prominent trees, maintaining access and looking towards the future of Bicentennial Park, having it be a park that can be reprogrammed, one that's not finding a lot of use today, but something that can be very much used tomorrow. But we're seeing a comfort, I should say just a comfort zone being reached after we're able to make this presentation.
Yeah. Well, I applaud you. I can tell there's a tremendous amount of constituencies that are always affected with a project like this. It's public space. There's people that have different passions associated with different aspects to it. So I don't know how you navigate as well as you always seemingly do those various constituencies. I guess my final question is really maybe one for this municipal council's office, and builds a little bit on what I heard Larry refer to. Sounds to me like we have a steering committee seeking or giving direction to the architect of record who's spending time legitimately under the guise of that direction, but perhaps outside the formal scope of formal city saying, please do this, and we have covered it with the expenses prior to the action. And so I see that the municipal council's office has signed the amendment, so I assume we're copacetic to approve the claims when they come in and the amendment today, even though the work maybe was done outside the scope of formal city action.
In the conversations that I've had with the architect, the firm knows that they are at risk to having performed that work without prior city authorization. So what staff has prepared is an item for your consideration. Council will have the final opportunity to approve that, but it'll be up to council whether or not they want to approve it or not.
Okay. But the lawyer is suggesting that it's appropriate as to form legality at least. Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Frank?
Could I bring a little more context to some of the issues that have come up that Trustee Roth brought up? How do we get in this situation? Why was there some controversy on it? I think there's a lot of things that happened on this. One is that it's a very visible park, important park. People have ownership in it, and maybe we didn't realize some of the stakeholders that were out there. Number of pieces of art that are in there, sculpture, that are going to have to be relocated and maybe relocated back in the park, but those answers aren't all, we don't have all those answers at this point in time. And so that became an issue because some people have, again, ownership on those pieces and want to know what happened. There were some sundry pieces of those alternates out there that became a point of discussion. Some people liked them, some people didn't like them, and they became a focal point for some people as we went on. I'm readily admit that when we had our first presentation to the Downtown Design Review Committee, the staff wasn't all on the same page on that. We had some coordination issues between departments on that I think we've rectified at this point in time, but it happened, and so we need to point that out. That was part of it. So there were a lot of things that went on. You know, process is an interesting, it's interesting to have too much, too little process. Eric pointed out there's a very similar process to what we had before. There was a stakeholders group. There were 9 meetings with that stakeholders group. Should that have been expanded or small? I don't know. You can always, 20/20 hindsight, look at maybe that should have been different. But there are 7 steps in the process. It's gone to the stakeholders group. It's gone through the Arts Commission. It's gone through the Parks Commission. It's gone through the Downtown Design Review Committee. It's gone through the Devon Implementation Committee. It's gone through the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust, and then ultimately the final decision will be the City Council of Oklahoma City. So there were 7 groups that they went to. 6 of the groups were subject to the Open Meetings Act. As we go forward and work the processes now, you know, again, if you didn't know what was going on, then there wasn't enough process. I understand that. So, but there was process.
Looks like you're getting a lot of project for the value. I don't mean to criticize that. I'm just trying to
No,
understand
not at all. Yeah.
the process. And I'm with you. I'm thankful for citizens' passion. Right? Just sometimes.
Thank you for the explanation. I do have a follow-up question, Eric. On the pavilions, there's 2. What is the usage of the pavilions? And I see 2 applications or 2 viewpoints of this, one with a glass top that you can see through and the other being non-see-through. And I know that sounds like a silly question, but if it's glass, then you have constant upkeep of keeping it clean.
To answer the first question about the use, I think there's a lot of future programming opportunities there that have yet to be identified. I do know from a Civic Center Music Hall perspective, they're looking at this as a pre-function or a pre-staging opportunity, things where you can gather and collect for events, but you could also have small, intimate events at the park and not have to use the entire park. So I think a lot of that is just up to future programming, whether that's something that the Civic Center puts on or something that is privately requested. So we have a lot of opportunity there. To answer the glass top question, though, I think I'm going to need to refer to Mike Clark for assistance. So it's not glass, it's actually a canvas material, and so we'd be proceeding with that element of the design.
Any other questions of Eric? Larry?
Yeah, Eric and Jim, going back to the $162,000, the way I understand from the presentation, the architectural fee included designing of the park itself that we're looking at right here. It included doing some design work on the City Hall side of Walker, which we're not going forward with right now at this time. And it also included, and I believe the correct one is the stakeholders asked for some alternatives to be designed, and it includes that.
Yes.
Okay, so it's an all-encompassing thing. And what Jim was talking about, as far as the stakeholders asking the architect to do that, that was done outside of the scope of the contract, but they did do it.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're down to this. You have looked at all the charges that are involved in both aspects, is the 162 and the original, and in you and your staff's opinion, we do owe that money.
I believe the architect is owed money for the design, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let's be, I mean, he asked for more money than that. That was negotiated. That was a negotiated
Okay.
amount.
So we are certain or convinced that we do, as a city, owe this amount of money, including the $162,000. Whether I like how it got there or not is really irrelevant.
We believe
I do owe it.
We believe the work was done.
Yeah, okay. And so we owe it. And so as a Christian, then, I got to go along and say, okay, we owe the man for the money, whether we like it or not. And so I just wanted to clarify that. There's one thing that you said, either you or Jim said, the bottom line here, the original contract must be amended to incorporate the landscape architect's increased scope. What I heard you say is that come Tuesday, should the council decide we don't owe this money or we don't want to pay it, then that must goes away.
I would say that's a language that we use in most of our amendments as form, and it's
But we
just
don't
a
usually
form
get in this
language.
situation.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's agreed, and he understands.
Okay.
The architect is aware.
And just from a point of, this is supposed to come up on the concurrence docket on Tuesday?
Typically it would. I haven't been to agenda prep yet, so it isn't anywhere yet.
Okay, well, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this or not, but I'm going to say it, and then you can tell me I shouldn't say it. I really think this should come up as an individual item to be discussed because of the substantive issues that are involved behind it.
I'd already thought of that, Mr.
And I apologize for saying that out of context.
Any other questions? Would like to seek approval of the amendment with the revised verbiage that will come with this to reflect stakeholders and so on. Do I hear a motion?
I'll offer a motion to approve the item with the revisions that you referenced.
Okay. Hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, please cast your ballot. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Eric. Do you have any additional?
Unless there's any questions on item B, which is actually the construction contract for the Bicentennial Park Award.
Why don't I go ahead and announce it, and once you hold on just a sec. Item B is ratify and approve addenda numbers 1 and 2 and adopting joint resolution with the City of Oklahoma City awarding joint contract to Wind Construction Company, Inc., Project MP 0419, Project 180 Bicentennial Park, City Hall Lawn Landscape Renovation and Civic Park Design Sculpture Garden, Couch Drive, and Walker Avenue, $3,627,908.50. Assigned Midwest Engineering and Testing Corporation as testing laboratory and approve contract and bonds, be it available through TIF and GO bonds. Any further comments, Eric?
And just to summarize, the bids were received in January. There were 5 bids. The low bid was Wind Construction Company. We are recommending base bid plus the alternates that we previously described for the pavilions and also the signs, and the work would be completed by mid-September.
Any questions? Jim?
Madam Chair, the only question I had, Eric, is to confirm that the assignment for testing purposes to Midwest is included within the 3.6?
It is not. The assignment, the funding for the testing is actually a separate budget that we set aside ahead of time. It's not included in the construction. But what you're doing with this action today is allowing staff to use that company to do the construction testing.
Okay.
They're under contract to the city, it's an independent testing lab that will come in and do that work.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions of Eric? Chair would entertain a motion. Okay. Jim motions, Larry seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, please cast your vote. Pardon me for skewing results there. Okay. Item C, amendment number 1 to contract for architectural services, project MB 1053, City Center East Garage Pedestrian Corridor, 100 North Harvey Avenue, fee increase of $7,250, which would be paid for through TIP dollars. Eric, you're our man.
I think this and the next one I'll stay present for, but this is a architectural amendment to Architectural Design Group. It's $7,250. This item and the one that is next are actually also related, and so this is for the Center's East Garage Pedestrian Corridor. There were some changes that were requested of the architect after the original contract was negotiated. There were some variances that were required that weren't originally anticipated that had fees associated with them. As you also might recall, there was a design development document that was completed for this that the architect assumed, and there were some items that needed revision as well that caused additional scope to be necessary just to modify that design. So the fee was negotiated at $7,250, and we're recommending approval.
Any questions of Eric? Chair would entertain a motion. Any second? Thank you. Any additional questions? If not, please cast your vote. Motion carries. Eric, do you have any additional? Are you ready for the next one? Item D, ratify and approve addendas number 1 and 2 and adopting resolution extending the time to award contract and awarding contract to Diversified Construction of Oklahoma, Inc., Project MB 1053, City Center East Garage Pedestrian Corridor, 100 North Harvey Avenue, in an amount of $690,000 and approve contract and bonds available through TIP dollars.
Thank you. This is also one of the priority projects identified in the implementation agreement. Bids were received on January 17th. Again, 5 bidders. The range of bids was $690,000 to $760,000. Diversified was the low bidder. Following approval, work can be completed on this project by mid-May.
Okay. entertain.
I have a question perhaps maybe for city manager if it's related to this. This city garage is constructed with outstanding bonds, I assume?
It was.
Is it paid off? The bonds are paid off, so the displacement of these spaces doesn't cause any concern about cash flow for
That's
the
correct.
structure?
Those bonds were all defeated.
Good, thank you.
Chair would entertain a motion. Second. Any further discussion? Please cast your vote. Motion carries. Eric, thank you very much for your very wonderful presentation. Very knowledgeable presentation. Phew. Item E, Oklahoma City Technology Business Launch Initiative, fiscal year 2011-2012, second quarter report available through Gold Bonds.
Madam Chairman, Wayne Embry from I2E is here this afternoon.
Hi, Wayne.
Madam Chair, trustee members, thank you for making time today. We can jump to the next slide. Brief overview of we're going to discuss just the quarterly snapshot, and then go into a little bit more detail on one of our specific programs that's been funded through the Business Launch Initiative, our executive in residence, particularly the sales executive in residence and entrepreneur in residence programs. And joining me today is Lynn Watson with Initial Call, who works with us in that capacity. And this also gives us an opportunity to honor Trustee McAtee's request to highlight one of our companies that we've funded and worked with through this program. So the next slide is the second quarter activities and year-to-date. Between the Sales Executive in Residence program and our CFO in Residence program that we discussed last meeting, we've worked with 30 companies in that capacity. 24 of those have received specific E&R mentoring. These are individuals that we bring in from around the country that have national and international experience in very specific areas related to startup companies and bringing companies to market. The Seed Step Angel group that we formed a little over 2 years ago in Oklahoma City has screened a total of 25 deals so far this year, and has presented 14 for potential investment. $225,000 has been invested in those companies, and there are actually several more that are in current due diligence for additional investment. We've had 10 fellowships with university students, all the way from undergraduate, including postgraduate fellows, and so that program is working very, very well. And we've held 11 training events and education and networking events during the last 2 quarters. The next slide kind of gives you an overview of the activity in I2E over the last 18 months. And why we took an 18-month snapshot is a lot of the companies we work with are very, very early stage, as this shows. So 70% of the companies that we're working with are in the proof of concept, literally the idea stage, and the seed stage. So earliest stages of company development. And so the 18-month snapshot takes in consideration the development cycle for these companies can take a while. But during that time, we've had 96 inquiries to I2E. 44 of those companies have become clients, and 13 of those companies are currently in active due diligence or have been approved for funding through one of our various funds. So we have a very aggressive pipeline in working through the Oklahoma City market, and we're very encouraged with the progress of those companies in the marketplace here. Go to the next slide. Again, this is just an overview of the 2 primary programs that we really are focused on with early stage companies and trying to help build their skill sets and their preparation to go to market. And Lynn Watson will talk a little bit more about the Sales Executive in Residence program here. And the real purpose of this is, with early stage companies, it's one thing to identify a need in the marketplace and build a product for that need, but more importantly is, are you going after the right first customer? Many companies fail not because they couldn't build the product, not because they couldn't find a customer, but in many cases they ran out of time and money because they spent way too much time trying to find the right first customer. And the work that we do with initial call really shortens that cycle and helps us understand in our own due diligence for potential investment that these companies are approaching the market correctly and the right set of customers. So actually, we go to the next slide, please. So this gives you kind of an overview of the services that initial call really helps provide to these companies, and what we use internally, especially with my staff, in evaluating companies and helping them prepare to go to market. I'm actually going to jump one more slide, and we're going to come back to this one. So I want to introduce you to DermaMedics, which is a company that's here in Oklahoma City that we've worked with through our programs and have made an investment commitment to. The investment hasn't closed yet, but should close this month. DermaMedics is a SkinCeuticals company, a pharmaceutical company focused on skin and skin-related conditions. Brian Fuller, the founder of DermaMedics, was a professor of biology at OHSC for 21 years and retired and founded DermaMedics to bring these proprietary compounds to market. The channel he's taken, the approach he's taken, is to sell directly to physicians, and this allows them to, by the nature of the compounds that they're selling, which are all on the FDA's recognized as safe list, he's able to sell these directly to physicians without having to get FDA approval, because in a sense they've already been approved. And the proprietary nature of his products are the compounding, the formulation. When we began working with DermaMedics a little over a year ago, he had developed the products and they were ready to go to market, but he was only just beginning to do initial sales. And so that gave us an opportunity to really begin experimenting with the sales executive in residence program that we've now fully developed. And I'm going to let Lynn Watson talk to you about that and what initial call does.
Thank you. If you could go back one slide, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you. When we had the opportunity to work with DermaMedics, a lot of times, as you may know, entrepreneurs know their product, they know their service, but they really don't know their first customer. They've sold to their friends, their families, and their peers. So what we get to do is come in and really take it from, let's see who your prospect list is, and let's make calls, and let's get real sales metrics, not just our friends and our family love the product. So what we were able to do is we, for 9 weeks, made calls for 180 hours, cold calls into medical spas, doctor's offices, dermatologists, to see what their need was. During that time, as you can see from the slide, we actually contacted and had a conversation with 455 what we would consider great prospects. And with that information, we put all of those prospects into a database. We capture their contact information, who the decision maker is, what are the current products that they're using, as well as email addresses. So this is a database that we started creating for DermaMedics so they can always go back and do another touch with an email, social media, whatever that touch needs to be. From those 455 contacts, we were able to set 54 appointments for a sales rep to go have a face-to-face conversation to talk about the different DermaMedic products. We learned from that face-to-face was a good thing to have. However, we also found out we only closed 5 sales immediately. But what we did learn is 2 weeks later, 5 more closed, and that has continued to be the process, because sometimes a physician needs to try the product before they buy. However, this gave us some metrics that we could look at. Then we could help create the sales pipeline to understand how many cold calls does a rep have to make on a weekly basis, so we could figure out what does that sales strategy look like for DermaMedics. Through that, we figured out that each sales rep needed to have at least 30 face-to-face appointments a week. So they're taking basically a pharmaceutical sales model, but they're also implementing some cold calling in their offices, so it's a warm call when they do set appointments for reps. So that was our first project that we did, just to verify that, yes, there is a need in the marketplace, and here's how scalable this product is. Then we had an opportunity to go back about 6 months later to do some due diligence, to really call the customers and say, why did you buy the products? What are you liking about the products? We called medical spas, and we called dermatologists, and we called pharmacies. And 2 products came to the forefront for us. One is the Common Correct Serum, We found in medical spas, many women and men are having procedures, lasering on their face. And they have found that one of their products called the Calm and Correct Serum minimizes that burning sensation and the redness. So all the contacts that we made, that was the leading product that they were using in the medical spa field. We also found another product that kind of came to the forefront, and that was called Dermarad. It's for radiation patients, and it is a topical that you put on 3 times a day when you're going through radiation, and it minimizes the burning. If any one of you have been through radiation, you know that there's a lot of burning in that process, and this minimizes it, and there's nothing else on the market that will minimize that burn. So we learned from that due diligence that those are 2 great products that Dermamedics and I2E can say, these are the leaders that we need to go to the marketplace. So we should be contacting the cancer centers, and we should be contacting the medical spas, and these are our leading products. But then, oh, by the way, we have 15 other products in our line. So we did that through the due diligence work. And last but not least, little did I know after we did this work that I would be diagnosed last April with breast cancer. So the first thing I did was in August before radiation, I contacted Dermamedics, and I said, okay, I'm going to be one of your users. Let's really prove if this stuff works. And I'm happy to tell you that it does. I did the regimen 3 times a day, and compared to my friends who've gone through breast cancer before we knew about Dermarad, my outcome, my burning was minimal, and I was really surprised that it really does work. So I'm a true advocate of this product, and was thankful that I could be the sales executive residence with this product.
So one of the things that Dermamedics is discovering from the effectiveness of Dermarad in particular is that a number of radiation oncologists are actually extending the number of treatments for particularly neck and throat cancers. Was what they found previously is they basically based the treatment regimen on what was the severity of the burn on the skin. And once it got to the point that the patients really couldn't take it anymore, they terminated treatments. It wasn't based on the efficacy, it was just based on the side effect. And now that they've got something that they can control the side effects with better, they can actually increase the dosage and increase the number of treatments, which should improve the outcomes for these patients. The next slide, and the one after this. So what have been the outcomes and the metrics for Dermamedics since we began working with them? In 2011, when we first started and engaged with Dermamedics, they had 3 employees, and that's now up to 7. They have 7 sales reps now and serving 8 states, and those customer accounts have gone from 20 customers to 152. And they've been able to take the sales strategy that Initial Call helped them build a year ago and apply that to these 152 accounts. They have 19 products that are going into the marketplace. They had 0 investment, I mean, the personal investment from Brian Fuller and his family, but they've raised $1.8 million over the last year, and that doesn't include the money that I2E has committed. And their revenues have increased about tenfold in this last year. So we see them as at least initially, right now, it looks like a success on the basis of the programs that we've put together, and we hope they'll be a success as an investment as well. And finally, we thank you again for your support, the OKC Chamber, the ORMF, and other partners, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just had a question. When it says customer, is that a physician's office or is that an individual patient?
These are generally physicians' offices. So the physician offices are usually ordering multiple quantities. And when you look at the radiation treatments, they're treating quite a number of patients.
Thank you.
Wayne, our working relationship with I2E and Dermamedics, is there assurances that they will stay in Oklahoma?
Well, that's a great question, Chair Hooper. And what we think increases the odds of that happening are the fact that they've not only investment from us, but also investments from a number of Oklahoma Angels. And the fact that their product is made here in Oklahoma, so they're using an Oklahoma-based firm. All their support and service companies are based in Oklahoma City. So it really is a poster child, if you will, for being able to anchor a company through the concentric rings of services and support.
Okay. Lynn, we're thrilled that you are a success story. So, any other questions of Wayne? Lynn?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's the Oklahoma City Economic Development Foundation fiscal year 2011-2012 second quarter report.
And we have a tag team today, starting out with Robin Roberts, followed by
Cynthia Reed?
yes,
Allison Oshel.
Allison Oshel, I believe, is back there to do retail, and then Cynthia Reed to do marketing.
I apologize. I failed to receive that report. Do I have a motion? Okay, so everybody motioning and seconding. Okay, all in favor, please cast your vote. Report received. Pardon me?
We're also honored to have a star from Stage Screen and TV. You were on the big screen at the Chesapeake Arena the other night.
Yeah, my husband had the clown hair. What can I say?
You have the kiss cam? You weren't on that? Okay.
No, we were in the clown hair portion. My name is Robin Roberts Krieger, Executive Vice President for Economic Development with the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. And I just wanted to add a note to your last presentation. Mayor Cornett recently had asked if there would be a chance that we could set up some meetings for him with some of our local entrepreneurs. So we took him over to I2E, and I believe it was 3 companies. And he had some one-on-one meetings with 3 different startup entrepreneurs. And one of the things we talked about is if the trustees would ever like to entertain a field trip and do meetings over there. They have a nice conference room, and it's kind of exciting what's happening. So I wanted to make sure that that is an offer if you should ever wish to do so. This was our first all-electric submission. It could go everywhere except Brent Bryant's office. We don't know what the firewall is. He apparently didn't like our submission. So now that you have it, we did agree that we probably should give you these glossy copies of some of the printed materials which we put at your places. You got it electronically, but it sometimes makes more sense when you can see it in a packaged form. Those 3 exhibits were the Velocity tabloid, which we send out to some of our key site selectors we work with, and Lariat Landing, which is the new marketing materials for some of the land on the east side at Will Rogers World Airport, as well as a new economic development brochure. And ironically, we put the economic development brochure, which basically talks about what we do. Get a lot of requests on intercity visits and so forth for what do you guys do in economic development. And it was coincidental that it was released a week before the Boeing announcement in January, and we happened to use a Boeing photo for the cover, so that was good synergy. This report is really for the period October to December, so second quarter of our contract. However, I'm going to make a few quick comments, and then Allison and Cynthia will kind of talk a little bit about what's happening in retail and marketing as well. We are working with the ACOG, the Association Council of Governments, on an EDA grant to get a 4-county CEDS, or Community Economic Development Strategy, completed. The consultant has been in the market, and we think that work is going well, and that work should be completed in about 2 months, at which time I'm fairly sure that staff will be reporting more. But we've been spending a lot of time in making sure that the consultants are getting to the right companies and the right public officials to talk with the 4-county folks about their economic development needs. We also did a rather major update on our property locator. It's called OKC EDIS. It was released back in 2004, and it's been completely retooled. We also have another contract so that properties that are major industrial lands, commercial properties, buildings, are automatically updated on that site. We don't have to have brokers entering that site by hand, which is very slow and laborious. And so that has been launched, and we're getting great feedback. There's a lot of activity, and with our new website that we launched about 6 months ago, between the 2 tools, we're getting a lot more inquiries coming in through the website, which is a good thing. It means it's working. We also, in the last quarter, hosted the National Business Incubator Conference. We did the regional conference for this organization that really helps startup companies. I2E is part of that group, and they've actually indicated they would be interested in us hosting the national conference for the entire country. So we're looking at potentially hosting it in the next couple years. There's several different national groups that we have targeted and are after. Many are tied more to the tech-based or manufacturing sectors, and that we're working with our Convention and Visitor Bureau and some other partners to actively go after those conferences to bring them here because they have a real economic development upside for us. And then just real quickly, we are either slightly behind on or ahead in all of our metrics. Nothing is extremely out of whack. The Boeing announcement, the Wichita, Kansas jobs was announced. It actually shows up in this quarter. So that's why you see a rather large bump in jobs, and you see some fairly high wages because they are also in this report. So with that, I don't have anything else specific. I'll have Allison come up, Cynthia, and then we can take any questions you might have if that works for Madam Chair.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Robin.
Allison?
Thank you very much.
Hi, Allison Oshel with Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. Thank you for allowing me to report on our retail programs at the Chamber. I like to do this on a calendar year basis, if you don't mind. Since it's February, it might be a good snapshot, apple to apple, look at 2010 compared to 2011, because we've got some really exciting things happening in the retail programs. I did go back to 2007, which is when this program began, and identified 20 retailers that the Chamber had directly recruited or assisted that have opened stores in Oklahoma City in that 5-year program, 5-year period. I'm certainly not including the outlet mall tenants, which we did assist a number of those with their openings. But curiously, in 2012, and we're only in February, we already have 5 tenants that we've assisted or recruited that have announced or have already opened stores in 2012. So some of them still haven't announced publicly, but...
Allison, from 2007 to now 20, and then just in the last 2 months, 5?
5, and I think the reason is that we started in 2007 romancing some of the tenants that are now coming to the city, that maybe visited last year or that found their locations last year. So I think what we're getting ready to see is a great snowball effect with the retail programs, and so just buckle up, because I think it's going to be a really good year for retail. So the total then is 25 for that 6-year period if we include 2012 to date, and 7 of those were national retailers. 18 of those are local retailers, and I just wanted to point that out because sometimes we take a little bit of hits at the Chamber that we're only paying attention to national retail, and we certainly care an awful lot about local retail. We think that's really what makes us unique, contributes to our quality of life and our image, and so we do pay a good deal of attention to that. And in fact, we supported 10 local retailers in the calendar year 2011. I've said this to this group before, but it bears repeating that we do have cities now that are calling from all over the nation asking us how we do what we do. So I think that is testament to the fact that you all are supporting a program that's working and other cities are wanting to mimic. In fact, 3 cities within Oklahoma, Lawton, Tulsa, and Duncan, I believe, have asked us for information on how we do what we do. And in fact, the city of Lawton, if you look at their retail incentive policy, it looks very much like the city of Oklahoma City's retail incentive policy. They copied some of our language verbatim. The International Council of Shopping Centers program is a big piece of what we do. It includes a lot of staff time. It also includes a lot of our program dollars. So for this fiscal year, we have attended the San Antonio show, which occurred in November. We've attended and had a booth at the New York City show, which occurred in December. We have, in fact, had 1 site visit since that December show from a prospect that we picked up from that show. The Las Vegas show, which occurs every May, we're gearing up for now. That's a big, big event. It is, in fact, ICSC's largest trade show. It's their international show. I'm not sure how many countries are represented, but somewhere between 35,000 and 55,000 delegates will attend that show. Last year, we generated 13 solid retail leads from that show, and we took those 13 leads and we dispersed them to 71 local brokers who followed up on those leads and tried to find site locations for those leads. I do know of at least one 40,000 square foot user that we picked up at the 2011 show that is currently getting ready to ink a deal. Unless it goes south, that we'll be able to announce that fairly soon. It is not a retailer, but it is a user who will take up some retail vacancy and take that off of the market. And then we're excited to announce that in August we will have our first ever Oklahoma-only ICSC show. We've typically been teamed up with Arkansas with the ICSC, and they've allowed us this year to separate and do our own deal-making session. It will be hosted in Oklahoma City, though it will be a statewide event, and so we think that will be an opportunity for us to really highlight and showcase Oklahoma City. South Oklahoma City is one of the areas that we pay particular attention to. One of the reasons is if you look at South Oklahoma City's retail vacancy, it tends to be higher than other areas of the market. And so what we have tried to do without very much program dollars, this year we have teamed up with OCCC. We wrote a survey for them to use to, their faculty is now using some of their students to conduct the study. They will also analyze the study results for us, but it's basically going to be a study of buying power of that OCCC campus because we haven't captured that anywhere in our marketing materials, so we hope that'll be a good number and one that we can exploit. We're also one of 4 partners on a program study called Vision 240. It's a study of the I-240 corridor, and the partners on that are City Planning Division, the Oklahoma City Chamber, the South Oklahoma City Chamber, and, of course, the Urban Land Institute. The Urban Land Institute applied for and received grant monies to do this study. And what we hope to accomplish from the study is to identify the stakeholders along I-240 to understand why they chose I-240 as a location and perhaps understand some of the opportunities that exist there and maybe some opportunities to make some corrections and make that a better place, not just for retail but for all land uses. And then the other thing that we've done with South Oklahoma City that seems to have resonated very well is we took 11 shopping centers that tended to have the highest percentage of vacancy, much higher than market average, and we provided data and analytics and research and psychographics and demographics for those 11 shopping centers, and we gave that to those shopping center owners or their broker reps. And whether or not it was useful information, we don't know yet, but we do know that that was received very well, and they were very grateful that we reached out to them in that way. And then the last comment I will make is that we've already since December hosted 4 site visits with retailers, which is remarkable in itself in just that brief period of time, but this is not the time of year that retailers show up. And so it just goes to the strength of our market. And again, I say just buckle up and get ready because we're in for a great ride this year. 2 of the retailers that showed up are 2 retailers that we've been after since 2007 and are significant retailers and would change the landscape of our city, I believe. So we're excited that they've at least invited us to the dance. So that's what I've got. I'll turn it over to Cynthia. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
I just wanted to very briefly talk about a component of the marketing program, and that's our public relations and earned media initiatives. We have 2 staff people that work on this full-time in trying to achieve stories about Oklahoma City and national media and trade media primarily. They also do a lot of work locally. During the first 2 quarters of this contract year, there were 46 national media stories that we worked on. 23 of those, we initiated that contact. The other 23, they initiated the request to us, and we assisted them. Then with local, we placed 141 local media stories during that time period. 30 of those, we made the contact, and 111 of those came to us. One of the things that is challenging with judging the success of those programs is measurement. There are a lot of different ways that you can look at the success of whether that's a positive placement. Ad equivalency is one measure. We don't really use that. What we have created is a system where we have measured the success of those placements based on whether they're meeting our key message goals and our key targets, the quality of the publication in which that story appears, and then we also add points for photography and some things that are some of our goals when we're trying to place those stories. So we give each story an average measure for those national stories. They had a rating of 17.6. That is somewhat meaningless to you, but for us, our goal is to try and get to 20 with every story. We're continuing to see an increase every year in the quality of the stories that we place. And then we also use some partners in trying to reach these goals. We have a news bureau where we have about 200 local members of the public relations and business community that we communicate with. We have meetings 4 times a year with those individuals to try and generate story ideas and story leads. We also share with them story leads that we have when we're trying to locate the appropriate business or entity to respond to a potential good story about Oklahoma City. We also work very closely with the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, and I want to mention this because they have a contract right now with two entities. One is Development Counselors International, and the other is the Pont Group. And each of those groups are PR firms based in New York, and they help to attract stories about economic development and in DCI on a national level, and the Pont Group on an international level. And we've been very successful. They've hosted an aerospace familiarization tour last year where we had writers come from all over the world to look at our aerospace community, and we've had great results from that familiarization tour. They've been very helpful with bio and some of our other initiatives. So if you see someone with the Department of Commerce, make sure how much they know we appreciate that involvement, because it's a very important part of what we do. We've talked a lot in the last year about our advertising programs, but our public relations initiatives are still an important piece of the puzzle in our image development program.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Any questions for us?
Any questions for Team Robin, Allison, and Cynthia?
I really appreciate hearing all that's happening and the fruit that's being borne by all your efforts. I just wonder, what more could we be doing to support all that's happening, and maybe what's not happening that we should be helping you with?
That's a great question. You know, and I was thinking about this when Allison was speaking. What we do in economic development and what we do in retail is very personal relationship building. It is, you know, building those long-term relationships, building those trust relationships. Once you get in the door, some of the projects that we've announced in the last year, we've been working on since 2000, before I got here in 2004. And so sometimes it takes a long time, and it's the trust. The cities and the state create the business climate, and that is a public policy role that only you can play. You create the business climate. You create the collaborative environment. You create all of those things in creating the strategic investment program, the SIP program that you oversee. I mean, that is a really great deal closing fund that not every city has. So that's a huge role, is really making sure, again, from a public policy perspective, that we are perceived as a pro-business city, a pro-business state, et cetera, and that we put the right tools in the toolkits. None of you have ever turned us down if we've asked for you to meet with a client, whatever we need you to do. But I think the financial partnership we have between our contract with the city and our contract with Oklahoma County allows us to really leverage and do more with more. And again, I think having the ability to leverage those dollars and have the staff available that's here, that's the continuity, that they build those relationships. If there's more money, we can do more. That's always the rub. That's always, you know, you're going to hear that from everybody. But again, that partnership of allowing us to do the day-to-day economic development work in the trenches, making the phone calls, making the call trips, doing the trade shows, putting the strategy together, trying to decide, you know, how much do we focus on aerospace versus energy versus biosciences versus logistics versus advanced manufacturing. But being there as a partner and really setting that stage from a public policy perspective. I mean, again, when I came here 7 years ago, I'd never worked in a city where the business community and the elected officials had such a solid relationship, whether it was working with you at that time as a county commissioner on some of the Tinker-related stuff, or some of you and certainly Jim Couch on what we could do, the strategies to take the city forward. So, you know, we try and take our resources as far as we can and leverage everything the best we can. If there are things that the trust wants us to do that we're not doing today, certainly open to those conversations as well. So, yeah.
Right.
How do you identify targets? How do you identify the targeted companies, and how do you identify the industry segments that you want to focus on?
You know, there's a couple of ways that we go about that. First, the easy ones are the ones where there's already a major presence here. We know we have energy. Are we looking at every aspect of energy? Not just the headquarters firms, but also some of the suppliers, the manufacturing side of that. Are there areas where we have expertise? We try and look at where our strengths are, and then can we grow that arena as well. When it comes to aerospace, we've done a lot of research. Our unique market niche or niche is really maintenance, repair, and overhaul, particularly of engines. We have a very large defense-driven aerospace sector. That doesn't mean we can't do the commercial side as well. But again, knowing our strengths and playing to those strengths. When we work with companies like Boeing, knowing that they have a relationship with a major base here, there are certain advantages for them to do business near their client, playing off of those kinds of strengths. We do the same thing in biosciences. We have done analysis of what kind of science we are good at, where do we have a cluster or a strength, and then working in that sector. Just because we don't do something today doesn't mean we're not always looking at it. Is it an area that we could grow or percolate? Sometimes, like with the weather center down in Norman, are there some things we can do to leverage off of that? So we have the what we would call the low-hanging fruit, probably the clusters that everybody thinks about being energy, aerospace, biosciences, but also logistics, because we sit where we sit in this country. We have 3 interstates that come through this city. We have a lot of land out at the airport. We have a lot of good weather flying days. And if you look at an 8-hour drive from Oklahoma City, a lot of market that you can access by being located here. So those are the ones that are probably the easiest. We're always looking at where are our strengths and how do we play to those strengths. We also are working with sometimes contractors, sometimes internal staff, to look at what companies, what intelligence is out there on companies that are looking to expand. We know there's some companies in the upper Midwest that are having some real hard times where they're located. There's some business climate issues there. Now everybody else is doing the same thing. How do we get our foot in the door to get some attention paid to us on whether or not we should be doing that as well? We have emerging industries in this community tied to software, music, film, and video, looking to see if there's some areas where, again, there's enough synergy and support for us to start growing. We now have a 40-person group going to South by Southwest in Austin, and a lot of that is tied to digital media. There's some film, there's some music, but we have a lot of emerging digital media companies that will be going down there. That would be very much a younger demographic, firms that are making really good money, but they may only have 5 or 6 employees in what they do. It's something that 20 years ago I really didn't even know anything about, and today it's a really important sector that we're trying to grow here. So does that answer? There's not one way we do it. I've got a team out in California right now calling on companies, but I won't tell you where because the mayor might ask us to leave. So a lot of different ways we do that: online research, relationship building.
Are we encountering any problems from the standpoint of skill sets, the available skill sets that these companies are looking for? It would seem to me that may be a major challenge for us.
It's a really good question. When your unemployment rates go below about 6%, certain sectors will start talking about we're at full employment. I can't find certain skills. We know that in IT there's a demand because really today every company needs savvy IT professionals, and we're not graduating enough at our Oklahoma institutions, let alone around the country. So there are certain skill sets. Some industries are starting to age rapidly. Their average age is in the 50s. They're concerned and share with us concerns about certain skill sets that they're afraid are going to be retiring, and there's not enough talent in that pipeline. So Oklahoma right now as a state, there's a bit of a disconnect between where the jobs are and where the skills are, and we need to address that.
Well, what about recruiting, though? Recruiting from other states, have we done anything in that regard?
We actually work with the companies. We work with a lot of companies in Oklahoma City to help them with their recruitment efforts of talent. We have found that it's more effective to work targeted with a company who's looking for a certain skill set. So we are providing, and Cynthia and I had lunch recently with one that's a household name that's going to be going after some fairly senior executive talent. We have relocation videos that we provide. As many of you know, we created a website called abetterlifeokc.com that is specific for relocating people to Oklahoma City. So we've tried to create the tools, and then if a company asks us to go with them and assist them at a trade show or a career fair, we go with them.
Any additional questions? Robin, Allison, and Cynthia, thank you very much. Chair would entertain a motion to receive the report. Second?
Second.
Cast your vote. All right. General Manager reports. Brent
Yes,
Bryant.
ma'am. I'd like to refer you to page 2 on this month's General Manager's report. At our last meeting in January, you authorized us to begin negotiations with Cameron International. I'm happy to report that they have announced that they do want to locate in Oklahoma City, and I sent them a draft report in the last couple of weeks. So I've added them to the list here on page 2. Now, that's the creation of 105 jobs, with an average annual payroll a little over, well, my eyes are getting bad, $5 million there. So, then I also want to refer you to pages 3 or page 4. There's some new information regarding AAA in your packet. We were working with them and seeking to get additional data from them, but they actually have had a decline in number of jobs out there, and I'm trying to get more information on that. And I'll advise you at the next meeting where we're on that. Paycom finished their second year with 149 additional employees. Our contract with them calls for them to add 492 jobs, and they earned a credit of $332,000 towards, if you'll recall, the infrastructure improvements that we put out there for that project where we put in new water and sewer lines. In addition, I'd like to refer you to page 5. Chesapeake Energy finished their first year with their project. Our contract with them calls for them to create 350 new jobs, and the first year they actually created 966 above their baseline number of jobs of 3,984. A contract capped the number of jobs they were eligible for, and right now I'm reviewing some of their capital expenditures, and once those are verified, they will earn a credit of a little over $1 million. Also, I wanted to point out to you, at our next meeting, you will have a resolution to come before you where you will seek to TIF District number 4. That is in your packet, but it actually is not under the purview of Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust. It's under the purview of the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. We will seek a resolution bringing it back to this body to actually move all of the funding over to this trust. That was always anticipated, and we anticipate doing that at the next meeting. On the outlet mall, I'm happy to report that through December, they were over $60 million over what we had anticipated. Revenues are a little over 51% above what was originally anticipated. So right now we're reviewing some of their original marketing expenses, and we're evaluating those, their regional marketing expenses. So I anticipate them seeking a reimbursement in the next 30 to 60 days. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Brent? Brent, thank you for noting the new information. It was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. Appreciate it, Brent. We've received your report by listening to you. Okay. Any comments from staff, trustees, or citizens? Only comment is thank you for the level of engagement. Thank you for the quality of the presentations and insights. We are so adjourned.